You know, when I was growing up, hustle meant hard work, because Pete Rose was Charlie Hustle and he worked hard, and like, that was a good word. Then to your point, somewhere in the last 5 to 10 years, the word hustle kind of got conformed into, and I know that the word hustle is like I hustled him, so there was a negative connotation, but to me, when you just asked that question, I laugh, like, why would work ethic compromise honor? Those are the two easiest things to balance on earth. So I think that just comes down to how we interpret words. I used hustle as a public figure from 2006 to 2014 aggressively. It communicated what I believed, which is there's a lot of things all of us cannot control. But one thing we can all control is how much effort we put into things. It's the most controllable thing. But then the word got manipulated and started to mean burnout, or win at all costs, or money over everything. And so I walked away from that word. I mean, my usage of that word is so low now. I just use work ethic. It allows me to explain the same thing. I'm not emotionally attached to any words, but being able to balance work ethic with doing the right thing is the only thing I believe in.
Very nice. So
I'll give you one to build on, if I may. I think one thing, I'm sorry to jump in, but that really inspired me. There's another thing I think a lot about. So how many people here by show of hands consume some of my content or have a good gist of my content? Raise your hands. Thank you. So for the people that raised your hands, for the other people that didn't, one of my favorite things to talk about is patience. I'm obsessed with it. I believe in it the most. I think it leads to very good behavior. I think impatience is often an indication of insecurity, rushing for success to show others, not themselves. And so for me, I push patience a lot. I'm stunned by how many people struggle with me pushing patience because they hear complacency. Because, and I'm fascinated by people's inability to balance words that may seem in contradiction. To me, I'm as ambitious as they come. I'm hungry. I'm sitting here today, and there's not a person in the audience that scares me that they're hungrier, because I don't feel fulfilled. I'm still super driven. I feel like I haven't even started. And so I sit here hungry, but I equally impatient. When I hear about my lifelong goal to buy the New York Jets, right? Like, a lot of people, now that I'm a public figure, like, when are you gonna do it? Next year? And it's funny, I see all these people out in the open, happened today at the airport in Newark. Guys like, when are you gonna buy the Jets? And I'm like, 32 years? And like the disappointment in his face. And so I think people struggle to balance what may seem like contradictions. And I think in that, there's something important to dig into. When I analyze my life and when I look at many others, and really for the many in here, which I appreciate the comments, but I know a lot of people here don't know who I am or don't know the depths of my story. Really at the end of the day, I'm incredibly interested in people. One thing that's just become more and more obvious to me is I like people more than most people. Like, genuinely, like even wanting to go out in the cocktail hour and talk to people instead of just being in my green room. That's just who I am. That's who I was born from day one to be. And I was able to really hone it over time. I think practice matters. I always, every time I say practice, I hear Allen Iverson, practice, and I understand what he was saying, but for me it's the reverse. A lot of people ask me about my entrepreneurial career. I'm 47 years old and I've been practicing for over 40 years. For me, it was the only thing I did. I was I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say this in this setting, but I was an atrocious student. And it was because I was pot committed. Long before people said go all in or be passionate, there was a level of self-awareness, there was a level of self-belief, there was a level of not willing to compromise. There was something that was inside of me that understood who I was. I just really understood it. I wasn't gonna apologize for it. I was definitely not interested in doing anything bad. I was just looking to be fully myself. And I think a lot of luck with DNA, a lot of luck with circumstance, and I think it was a perfect storm. Even the era that I'm growing up in, what is very clear to me is that I have a very strong knack for understanding attention, right? I just have always understood it. Even when I was doing lemonade stands, when I was 6, 7 years old, back to practicing for 40 years, I was more interested in the signs and where I was gonna put the signs to get people to buy the lemonade than even the money. I was more interested in the attention than the money. So, look, I'm 47 years old. The explosion of the internet happened just as I was ready to go into the real world. That's just a little bit of a luck of the draw. Sure, I can decide that I would have been a good newspaper man or a radio man or a TV man if I was born 2 generations earlier, but in all those scenarios, there are gatekeepers. There are gatekeepers. The internet and social media, and the reason this is such a big deal, and whether you think it's awesome or you think it's bad, there's so much that goes along with it. What everyone's struggling with is nobody's in control. Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, these platforms are empty. There's no editor-in-chief. There's no head of the studio. This is not a subjective opinion, it's merit. Who's the human could put in the work, put in the message that most attracts people's attention, and we judge in this room, in the world, who people pay attention to, but that's silly. That's you judging clear data that supports that other people find XYZ interesting. We all have different interests, we all think different things are interesting. So, I think the story of me is, I'm very fortunate, and that's why I'm incredibly, driven by gratitude. I'm a very simple dude who's doing a lot, right? I think when people look at me from the outside, I have 700 trillion businesses. I'm putting out content 58 times a day. I'm always up to something, but in reality, I think I'm incredibly simple, which is I keep life very basic. I'm not doing it for the accolades or the trophies. I'm humbled by it. I'm humbled to take a selfie, but it's not what I strive for. I don't need that. My parents took care of my self-esteem, so I'm good. I'm just living my life, and at this point, I'm just trying to, there's probably a level of guilt that is a currency inside of me, that it worked so well for me, that mix between gratitude and guilt inspires me very heavily to try to give an ounce to the world what's inside of me. And so that's how I roll. I sit on the board of Pencils of Promise and Charity Water. We do a ton of work in Africa to build schools where there are no schools, to get clean water. By the way, you wanna be grateful real fast? There are 750 million people on Earth, almost 10%, that do not have access to clean water. We worry about dumb, silly things, like our internet's slow, right? Or like silly things, and there's 10% of our society doesn't have access to clean water. Think about that. So I sit on these boards, and I have all my wealthy friends, many who came up the way I did with less than more, and they're like, Gary, can you take my 15-year-old son to Africa for a week? I wanna really show them. I'm like, okay, but just to save you some time, they're not gonna come back and be totally different people. We try to do all these silly tactics. We're not gonna win that game. I think what we can do, I think we need to focus on civility and humanity and good traits. One thing we do very poorly is we create ideology that can't be accomplished. It is the human spirit. We need to get off the religious bandwagon of that you can recreate it. You can't, right? You can control it. You can mitigate it. Money is a big one. I talk to my parents about my situation, and I'm always like, well, there's gonna be an age where I stop giving it to them. And I look at their eyes and I walk away, and I know they're laughing at me because they think it's already too late at 14. And I think, oh no, that's the right time. And you go by stories. I have unlimited friends who came up in very wealthy environments, whose parents made them get jobs and stopped giving them money around 14, 15, 16. And when I analyze them versus friends who didn't, in over 40, 50 people, it feels a little bit better. But we're not gonna be able, my kids are not gonna work in my dad's liquor store for 15 hours a day from 15 years old on, 7 days a week for 20 years. That's not happening. And that's okay. It allows me to make fun of them that they're soft.